From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Donald Trump romps to victory in the Iowa caucuses with 51% of the vote on Monday evening, while Ron DeSantis finishes second with 21%, and Nikki Haley comes in slightly behind at 19%. All three candidates say they're going on to New Hampshire in a week for that primary. And what are the prospects for each one going forward in the GOP presidential race? Welcome. I'm Paul Gigot, editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal, here on our Potomac Watch podcast with my colleagues Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. Welcome to you both. Well, there's no getting around it. Trump won big, as the polls had suggested he would, just over 50%. Turnout was way down at the caucuses from 2016, the last non-incumbent caucuses, but that might have been the weather, which was extremely cold. But no doubt that Iowa Republican Party is now Trump country. He won big with conservatives, bigger than in 2016, for example. Just to give you a couple illustrations here. 2016, when Trump lost the caucuses narrowly to Ted Cruz, he got 21% of the white evangelical vote. This time, 53%, if you can believe that. 2016, he got 21% of those who describe themselves as very conservative. This time, 61%, 40 percentage point increase. Somewhat conservative, 24% in 2016, 47% this time. So the only group he got less of was self-described moderates, but there were only 9% of those in the entrance poll that was done by media organizations. Haley won that with 63%. So let's listen to Donald Trump celebrate his victory.
So we're going to come together. We're going to drill, baby, drill right away. Yeah. Drill, baby, drill. We're going to seal up the border. Because right now we have an invasion. We have an invasion of millions and millions of people that are coming into our country. I can't imagine why they think that's a good thing. It's a very bad thing. So I don't want to be overly rough on the president, but I have to say that he is the worst president that we've had in the history of our country. He's destroying our country.
So Kimmy doesn't want to be too tough on Biden, but he's only the worst president in history. Delivered in a somewhat subdued tone by Donald Trump. What do you think the message is about Trump from Iowa?
So I think the message out of Iowa about Trump is that he is still very much a front runner. This was obviously a good night for him. Just to comment on Iowa, it sometimes throws up unusual results, surprising results. These ones were more in line with the final averages, poll averages from Real Clear Politics. Everyone coming in close to what they were polling at. DeSantis did slightly better than those polls were suggesting, coming in second. But he had been running at about 50%, and he got 50% of the vote. As you note, a lot of that because of working class voters and evangelicals. If you look at the map of the 99 counties that are out there, the more rural they were, the better he did among them. Closer you got into cities and suburbs, a little weaker. And that's, I guess, the other thing that I would note about this is that, yes, Trump got 51% of the vote, but that means that 49% of Iowa still voted for someone else. And some of those counties really fascinating, the suburban areas outside of Des Moines. Trump finished more with 35, 38%. Haley coming in, and DeSantis with strong, almost sort of tied seconds. In Johnson County, which is outside of Davenport, Haley actually won that county. Now you can say it was only one county out of 99. And indeed, Trump winning 98 out of 99 is a pretty big deal. But I would just point out, again, this guy is essentially the incumbent. And what you're seeing out there, though, is nonetheless some real reluctance from about half the party to just immediately get on board that train.
Yeah, what you're talking about there, Kim, is signals of general election potential weakness, right? Suburban voters, which will be not in Des Moines necessarily or Davenport, but in other states and some big cities, the suburbs will be the swing vote. And Trump is weaker there than some others. Also, independents breaking to Haley And that will be a factor in the New Hampshire primary next week, but also for the general election. Biden is weak with independents, but so is Trump. So some signs of weakness there. But Kyle, I think Kim has hit on the essential point here about Trump's performance so far and his position in the polls is that Republican voters are almost treating him as if he is the incumbent. They're thinking of him as having been president, which he was, even though he's been out of office. They're thinking of, well, he's running for re-election.
Right. And it's hard to imagine, I think, a more favorable outcome for President Trump than these Iowa caucus results, at least to me, because one of the questions going into this was whether some portion of the people who say in the polling that they support President Trump would turn out to be fair weather supporters. And I mean that almost literally, given the sub-zero temperatures in Iowa. And that did not turn out to be the case. He did not underperform his polling significantly as happened in 2016. And then there was no clear head-to-head challenger to him, given that Ron DeSantis came in at number 2, Nikki Haley close behind, almost neck and neck there. And it's not clear where Ron DeSantis goes, given his struggles in the polling in future states. And yet, with Nikki Haley in 3rd in Iowa, she does not really get any boost in momentum going into New Hampshire. A couple things that I would add to the conversation so far is I agree with those points on the weakness of President Trump with suburban voters. And don't forget that that is where Republicans lost not only the midterm elections when he was in office, but also where President Trump lost in 2020. The data are very clear. In Wisconsin, for example, there were 5 Republican congressmen elected in 2020, and President Trump trailed all of them. These are not Milwaukee districts. These are all around the state. He trailed Mike Gallagher in that district by more than President Trump's margin of loss to Biden statewide. And number 2, I think a caveat to keep in mind here is that the Iowa caucus is not a high turnout event, and this was not a high turnout caucus. So the total number of votes that we have here right now so far tallied is about 110,000. And that compares to the total 2020 Iowa presidential election result of 1.7 million votes. So really what we have here is about 6.5% of Iowa presidential voters who turned out in the caucus, and about half of those went for Trump.
And this was down from the caucus vote in 2016, too, which was, 167,000 or something like that?
I think it was 187,000 in 2016,
so
and that was a record.
Down. All right. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the prospects going forward for Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. And let's turn to Ron DeSantis and his prospects. He spoke to supporters after the caucus results were announced. Let's listen.
They were just so excited about the fact that they were predicting that we wouldn't be able to get our ticket punched here out of Iowa. But I can tell you, because of your support, in spite of all of that they threw at us, everyone against us, we've got our ticket punched out of Iowa.
Got his ticket punched. DeSantis talking a little bit about the fight for freedom in his speech there. Kim, I just have to point out here the DeSantis strategy. He put enormous resources into Iowa, said he would go to all 99 counties, which he did. He tried to go to Trump's right, peel off some of the Trump voters by campaigning, for example, on that 6-week abortion ban he signed in Florida. Thought that would help him with evangelicals. He ran as the anti-woke fighter, and it didn't work. Trump, as I pointed out earlier, got 61% of the very conservative voters, DeSantis only 26%. Trump got 47% of the somewhat conservatives. DeSantis only got 18% of those. Haley got 25% of those in the exit polls. So both the investment in Iowa, even though he finished second, and the strategy of trying to kind of out-Trump Trump, or not out-Trump Trump, it's more Trump's agenda, but to hit Trump from the right for not fulfilling that agenda and saying that DeSantis would be more effective at implementing it. It didn't work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you put your finger on his big problem. I mean, let's give DeSantis credit. He did put in the work. He poured a lot of money in there. And often Iowa voters will reward that. I think he came up against a couple of things simply from a tactical perspective. One of them, and we should give Donald Trump credit, is Donald Trump had a much better ground game this time in Iowa. It matters a lot. Back in 2016, he was sort of all over the place. This time, he put a lot of resources in it. And those voters who said they supported him, it looks like his team actually managed to get them to the caucuses. And that really helped Donald Trump and I think hurt Ron DeSantis. Secondly, he came up against this kind of Haley surge that has been going on in the last couple of weeks. Look, I think one of the problems here and one of his mistakes, and you just mentioned it, is that he spent a lot of his time chasing Trump voters. And if there's a lesson that maybe comes out of this for all the candidates, whoever is left standing, and I think this also shows the strength of Haley's approach instead, is that there's clearly a great affinity between a lot of those voters and Donald Trump. And you're going to have to do something more than say that you are the latest incarnation of him, because the voters' argument is going to be, well, we got the real thing right here. Why do we want a pale imitation? And I think instead, maybe the way forward is more what Haley has been doing, which is to say, I am the alternative. We need a new approach. And if you don't like some of the things he's doing or the drama, look to me instead. I'm an alternative. So I think that was one thing. Just from a strategic sort of point of view, I think one of DeSantis's mistakes here, too, was just that he set expectations a little too high. He roared into Iowa saying he was going to win the state. And so while he did finish second, he doesn't come out of this looking very strong.
His investment in Iowa far exceeded Nikki Haley's, both in time and in money and organization. And he had the support of Kim Reynolds, who was the governor of the state, popular governor. He had the support of Bob Vander Plaats, who's one of the evangelical leaders, but he didn't help him turn the evangelical vote. Trump organized a lot of the evangelical pastors behind him. Looking at DeSantis moving forward, it was notable that he said he was heading right to South Carolina. Well, the South Carolina primary isn't for another 5 weeks, late in February. The New Hampshire primary is next Tuesday. And yet DeSantis isn't going there. And I think that's a function, Kyle, of the fact that he is not doing very well in New Hampshire. Before Chris Christie left, DeSantis was in fourth and in single digits. Haley, by contrast, has moved up to a little under 30% in recent surveys, and Trump just under 50. So DeSantis, I mean, I don't know that it's fair to say he's writing off the state. I'm sure he'll go up there. But it's clear he thinks that if he's true to his word here and he thinks he's got a real ticket punched out of Iowa, and I'm not sure that's right, given how much he invested in it, he seems to be saying he'll make his stand in South Carolina.
Yeah, his campaign seems to be preparing to be able to say, well, we didn't really compete all that much in New Hampshire, and so explain away a pretty big loss that looks like it's coming. In the recent Real Clear Politics average in New Hampshire, he's at 6.5% in fourth. Again, that's before Chris Christie's dropout is really reflected, although most of those Christie votes you would imagine going to Nikki Haley. I will say this for DeSantis, though, in Iowa, I do think that he showed that the investment in time and organization that he put in mattered, because he is the only one who really outperformed the polling average in the actual results. And
yeah, but it was so small.
No, I mean, it's a handful of points. So the final Real Clear Politics polling average has him at 16 in Iowa, and he ended up with 21. And that's a 6-point gap.
Yeah, that's not. But I mean, showing the polling average when you're down that low and that far behind, and you invested so much in Iowa, it's just not that impressive.
Well, it's not as impressive as winning, but it matters whether he came in second or third. And having the organization to get his supporters out in those freezing temperatures, if Haley had had the same kind of organization and the same kind of overperformance, we might have a DeSantis dropout today, which is not the kind of thing that we're looking at. And so I think that his team did a great job there as far as they could in terms of organization. I do think also I wouldn't underrate his struggles to relate to people on the campaign trail and to inspire people. And also his slide in the polls in other states, I don't think has helped him, because if you look at the exits, the people who decided within the last month, the plurality of those went to Nikki Haley. And I think there may be also just a segment of Republican voters who don't want Trump and they don't want Biden. They want somebody else. And they are going with the horse that looks like it is gaining speed, not the one that's losing speed.
I think that's my point.